Come on in, make yourself comfortable. Pour yourself a mug of that strong coffee. Good. Now, settle in. This ain't no campfire story, mind you. This is something that's been passed down quiet like in my family for generations. A story about a creature. Raw head and bloody bones, they called it. Not a hint, not exactly. More. Substantial. More real. More real. And it still haunts the edges of this holler long after the last of my kin who saw it are gone. You can still smell it sometimes after a hard rain, that wet earth and something rotten underneath. Rotten underneath. That's how you know it's near. It's how you know it ain't finished. Back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, this was a harder place than it is now. Briar Ridge, just yonder, was a wilder place. Thick with oak and pine, a tangle of rhododendrons so dense you could get lost from conceit to can't see. My great-grandpappy, Silas, he settled this land, built his cabin right here, same spot we're sitting. Folks mostly kept to themselves then, scratching out a living from the dirt, hunting in the woods. The air was cleaner then, you could taste the pine needles and damp earth. Life was hard, but it was honest. And mostly, it was quiet, except for the wind and the crickets, and sometimes something else that whistling through the trees after dark. My granny woman, she always said you don't whistle after dark. Invites things in. Times were tough, sure, but there was always family. Gatherings on Sunday, potluck dinners, stories told by firelight. I remember my own granny, bless her heart. She'd make the best peach cobbler you ever tasted. She'd sit there, her hands gnarled from working the earth, telling tales of old Haint blue paint on the porch ceiling to keep the boogers away, or how an empty rocking chair was always a bad sign. We'd laugh, sure, but there was always that kernel of truth in her voice. That feeling that these mountains held more than just trees and creeks. The smell of her kitchen, warm with cinnamon and wood smoke, was a comfort against the chill outside. A comfort you learn to cherish. Now, not far from here, just past the old mill pond, lived the woman folks called Elara. She was a granny woman of sorts, knew her herbs and potions, but there was always something queer about her. Not mean, just different. She lived alone, up in a little cabin near the deepest part of the woods, and she kept a hog. Now, this wasn't just any hog. This was a massive beast, black as pitch, with tusks like daggers. Folks said it was her only companion, and she treated it more like a child than livestock. The ground around her cabin, it smelled of rich, damp earth, but also something else, a musky, wild scent, like the woods themselves had moved in, and a faint, bitter tang like dried herbs and old blood. One harsh winter, food got scarce. My great-uncle Jebediah, he was a good shot, a good provider. He'd been hearing tales about Ilara's hog, how big it was, how much meat it'd provide for the whole holler. He decided he was fixing to get it. He went up that ridge, rifle in hand, the air biting cold, stung his cheeks. He found the hog, rooting around near a stand of pines, its breath booming white in the frigid air. It was bigger than he'd imagined, like a small pony. He felt a shiver, not just from the cold. He aimed, and he shot it clean. The hog fell. A a sound like a small tree coming down. The smell of fresh blood, metallic and hot, filled the cold air, mixing with the pine. He felt a strange sort of triumph, mixed with a queer unease, but he figured it was just a hunting fever. Jebediah, he skinned it right there, butchered what he could, working fast against the setting sun and the chill that seeped into his bones. He took the prime cuts, the hams, the shoulders, but he left the head, skinned and stark white, and the bloody bones scattered where they fell. Figured the buzzards and coyotes would take care of the rest. He headed back down the ridge, his pack heavy with meat, feeling the cold metal of his rifle against his numb fingers. He still had that unease, a cold knot in his gut, like he'd left something important behind. The woods felt quieter now, too quiet. He could almost hear Alara's wail, a long, mournful sound carried on the wind. But that, he told himself, was just his imagination. That night, Jebediah couldn't sleep. The smell of fresh pork, usually so comforting, now seemed to cling to him, heavy and cloying. He kept thinking he heard something outside, a scuttling, a dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the frozen ground. He dismissed it as raccoons or bears. But then, it wasn't just sound. He felt a vibration through the floorboards, a low thrumming that seemed to come from the very earth. He got up, went to the window, and peered out into the moonless night. He saw nothing, but as he turned to go back to bed, he felt a sudden, sharp cold like icy fingers on his neck, and he smelled it. Not the pine and damp earth, the smell of decay, of damp fur and something else. Something impossible. The smell of his own fear. The next morning, a few men from the holler, including my great-grandpappy Silas, went up to help Jebediah retrieve the rest of the hog. The air was still biting, the ground hard, but something was wrong. The silence wasn't just quiet. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, like the woods were holding their breath. They reached the spot where Jebediah had left the remains. There was nothing, no scattered bones. No scattered bones, no skinned head. The snow was churned up like something big had dragged itself away, leaving a faint trail of bloody streaks. And then they saw it. Ah! A fresh track, unlike any they'd ever seen. Not a bear, not a wolf. This was. It's like goggling. It was a hoof print, but around it, the faint imprint of what looked like a bear's paw, and nearby, claw marks like a mountain lion had raked the bark off a tree. The hair stood up on their arms. The cold wasn't just in the air. It was in their bones, a deeper, colder kind of dread. They could almost taste the metallic tang of fear in the air. They followed the tracks, a terrible fascination pulling them deeper into the woods, the smell of damp earth and something acrid growing stronger. The trail led them to Alora's cabin. The door was open, swaying slow on its hinges, creating a low, mournful creak. Inside, it was cold, emptier than a tomb, but on the dirt floor near the hearth was a small pile of something. My great-grandpappy said he'd never forget the sight. It was a raccoon's tail, freshly severed, still twitching faintly, and beside it, a small, crudely carved wooden idol of a boar. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood, stale smoke, and something else, something sharp and metallic, like a fresh wound. They felt the cold from within the cabin seeping into their very marrow. It was then they heard it. A guttural snort from the woods behind the cabin, followed by a sickening crunch like bone on bone. They turned slow and silent, their breath catching in their throats, and there it stood. Not a hog, not a skeleton. It was a monstrous thing, taller than any man, a shambling horror of bone and sinew. The hog's skinned head, stark white and gruesome, was at the top, its empty eye sockets staring, but below it, the bones of its body had reassembled, somehow fused together, and from those bones protruded the wicked, curved claws of a bear, and the sharp, jagged teeth of a mountain lion glinted in its jaw. A raccoon's tail, still fuzzy, twitched from its bony rump. It smelled of decay, of wet earth, and fresh blood. It was a fetch, a token something unholy brought back. It was Rawhead. It was Bloody Bones, and it was looking right at Jebediah. They ran. My great-grandpappy said he'd never run so fast in his life. The cold air burned in his lungs, the taste of terror like ashes in his mouth. They didn't look back. But Jebediah wasn't as lucky. He screamed, a sound that tore through the quiet holler, and then it was cut short. They heard the crunch, the tearing. They never found his body, not a single bone, just a fresh patch of disturbed earth, soaked dark with something. The smell of raw meat and something foul clung to the air for days. Elora was gone too, vanished. Folks said she'd either been taken by her creation or had simply faded back into the woods, content that her pet had gotten its revenge. My great-grandpappy never hunted on that ridge again. He always kept a shotgun loaded and a keen eye on the shadows. He said he could still feel the brush of something cold against his skin years later. Now, you might think that's just an old story, a booger tale told to scare children away from the deep woods. But my family, we know better. There's something up on that ridge. Even now sometimes, after a heavy rain, when the air is thick and still, you can smell it. That peculiar mix of wet earth, pine, and something rotten, something predatory. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind whistles just right, you can hear a low snort, a dragging sound, like heavy bones being pulled across the ground. My granny always painted her porch paint blue, and never left the rocking chair empty for long, just in case. Just in case it was still out there, wandering. They say, Rawhead and Bloody Bones only hunts the one who killed it, but who's to say what happens when it's done with its revenge? What does a thing like that do then? Just wander, collect more parts. The mountains keep their secrets, sure enough, but some secrets, they just spill over and leave a stain. You feel that chill again, don't you? That touch of something cold? Yeah, it ain't just the draft from the door. It's the mountain whispering its old bloody tales. And a reminder that some things, once roused, they never truly go back to sleep. What? Not ever.